I hear a
The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people are evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS-HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to you and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha, everyone. I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont, and Lou Latour from the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, nonprofit HVERI. Today is Thursday, March 6, 2025. Kilauea has had another episode, now in about a weekly pattern. Episode 12 was this past week, Tuesday and Wednesday. So we'll cover that this week. And how are you guys today? How are you doing today, Dane?
Oh, doing good. Yeah, just getting through the last episode, getting used to the weekly episodes up on Kilauea and these lava fountains, and I was most interested in to see if that south vent was going to be the dominant vent versus the north.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it was a little more very variable than some of the recent episodes. Yeah, so we'll look at that a little bit, but I think we'll just enjoy a lot of the sights of the episode here and step through our regular paces. How are you doing today, Lou? You're up here in the corner with us.
I'm doing good. Just like you guys watching this eruption. This last episode was pretty amazing. My thing is over the rim shots I've been seeing, just spectacular how tall that fountain was.
Yeah, they're saying about as tall as the one last time, right? So pretty tall. We'll get into that here in a minute. And you guys are seeing highlights of this episode shot by the USGS here on a main screen. So we'll go through our usual update this week. Dan will be collecting questions, leading discussion in the chat, along with Lou. Appreciate you guys doing that. We'll take a break partway through, and then we'll wrap it up with time lapses and images and all of that, as we usually do. You guys want to add anything before we get into it here?
Nope. Well, let's go ahead and do it.
All right, so let's set up for our summary here. Let's see here. Some of the buttons are a little different. And all right. Hello, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano summary for March 6th, 2025. Kilauea, now in about a weekly pattern of eruptions, has had its episode 12 that erupted from Tuesday to Wednesday of this week, March 4th and 5th. It began with some sluggish ooze outflows from both the south and north vents earlier in the morning, 7:30 and 9:30 a.m., followed by continuous sluggish flows at 12:45 p.m., and then an onset of fountains at 2 p.m., which grew to 600 feet tall, 180 meters within that first hour or so. You're seeing here views from the west rim of Kilauea caldera looking down at those twin fountains from the south vent on the right and the north vent on the left there. If we look at the web camera from the west rim as well, you can see the fountains put flows across over 2/3 of the crater floor, both through rivers of lava that came from the fountains, as well as ooze flows that emerged near the downdrop block on the eastern sector, as we've seen recently. The S2 camera shows us the sequence of the north vent activating first, and shortly thereafter the south vent activating as well. Both fountains grow to a fairly tall height near the rim of the crater before the north vent shuts off in the evening around 8:26 p.m. That following morning, between 8:42 and 9:11 a.m., the north vent reactivates, south vent shoots up again, and lava flows onto the crater floor. So the lava came across the crater floor. Here is a thermal image of the crater floor showing the fountains in the southwest corner of the caldera, where the vents are located, putting lava across the center of the crater floor and towards the north here, with the ooze ups here on the right side of the screen in the eastern sector. So here we have the tilt at Kilauea summit for the past month. So we can see that the volcano is repressurizing, building up to our 12th episode, deflated more quickly when we had both vents active together, and then more slowly once we had just the south vent activating, and then once eruption shut off, we've had this recovery of pressure beginning here that we now anticipate from the USGS, predicting the timing of episodes from the inflation rate, that the next episode will come within the next 5 to 7 days. So the main hazard of people is still the VOG. Here is a VOG forecast from the VMAP project showing fog that is currently collecting in the Kona coast, clearing out over the next couple of days as the trade winds continue to blow it away. But at present, our Purple Air Citizen Science Monitoring Network is showing impact and air quality on the Kona coast. That's Kilauea. Mauna Loa remains pretty quiet. Only 23 earthquakes in the summit region over the last week here. The rates are quite low, still in that background refilling rate following the 2022 eruption, as the volcano continues to very slowly fill and inflate. And this is the up and down GPS showing the upward movement of the crater rim at Mokuaweoweo. And that's our Hawaiian Volcano summary for this week. So we'll move on to our hazard in a little more detail here. And I thought I would start off by showing you guys the KP camera from Mauna Loa that is looking down at Kilauea caldera and this gas cloud that comes out from there. So they're in the background times now in our in-between episodes, our pauses. We expect that we're emitting somewhere in the range of 1,000 tons of SO2 per day. So that's what you see coming out here at the beginning in this very first frame. And so I'll play this. And one thing to note is that this episode was marked by a lot of rain at the onset of it. So you do see some clouds coming through at the beginning here, but we'll see the gas cloud and the fog come through that despite that. There it is. You can see it's almost always blowing to the right and going upwards with the trade winds. This is towards the west, towards the Ka'u Desert, and away from most of our populations that live nearby. But it is catching that onshore, offshore on the Kona coast. And so turning to the VMAP project once again, here's that fog dashboard. We can look at both SO2, which is the raw gas coming out of the volcano. And you see it's more concentrated and stronger there at the closer sites to the volcano. As well as you can see when it slips back around, you're catching a little bit of this original emission of SO2 from the big puff that came out during the episode 12. If we switch it to the SO4, that is our particulates, the aerosols. And now you can see that there is effect further away from the vent itself. And this is what's often catching the Kona coast and a lot of this offshore environment as well. So that's the forecast. It's not as bad as last week when we had the initial blast blow to the southwest originally, but then we had that Kona wind pattern blow the fog back across the island. So there was fog a couple of days after that. That does not seem to be in the cards this time. We'll have to wait until the next episode to see what comes of that. The state Department of Health has this map that's showing air quality across the state as well. They are showing some impact here in Kona and Waikoloa, though not as many stations. Not as much convincing elsewhere. You see there are occasionally high values here by Kahului, but elsewhere in Maui it looks pretty normal, as with the rest of Hawaii Island here as well too. Purple Air has a greater coverage, so we like to turn to this. And so you can see a little bit more density of data on the Kona coast, and we can come here to Maui as well. And there it is, all in the green, Purple Air on Maui. There was a satellite capture of this SO2 plume. There it is. As we just showed you guys, blowing largely offshore to the southwest here. And we can also turn to the windy.com SO2 layer. And here are the redder the colors, the more intense the SO2. So from the satellite, you're seeing here the most recent emission capture, but also this trail of SO2 that's associated with emissions from the volcano over the previous episodes as well. So there it is, a pretty big patch of this stuff across the ocean, and we just hope the trade winds keep blowing it out, or we can have that nicer wind here in this direction coming through. Zooming way in now to the national park. Here you can see we have sites in the green around the caldera where they're being monitored, and in the southwest as well. 11-mile-an-hour winds, 5 meters per second, so keeping the plume moving towards the south-southwest there. And we like to always go back to these charts that give us a little bit more of a history the last 24 hours, and we can see if anywhere in a park has had impacts in air quality during weaker winds or changing winds or that kind of thing. But it looks all in the clear, as you can see here, for the past 24 hours now. So that's our volcanic hazard summary, which is just a gas, thankfully. All the lava is pouring into the crater and stuck in there and can't really go anywhere. So great that it's great for viewing, and it's really the gas and Pele's hairs that will blow out with the gas that we have to worry about. So we'll move on to the earthquakes. And looking at our recent earthquakes, this map is not displaying properly at all. Let's try to fix that here. Okay. Looks like there is some issue. Let's reset this map here. So when it loads by default, it's got all this stuff on it. So I like to clean it up, simplify it, and usually I'll do this beforehand, but since it's not letting me, I'll change it over live for you guys right here.
This map does not like when we live stream. That has always been a...
Yeah, and my browser has had an update recently also, and that's not helping things either. So, a lot of things that happen behind the scenes here that are always changing, and we're just trying to stay on it as much as we can. And it's just another wrench here this week. All right, there's how I like to see it. We have our earthquakes plotted by depth, with those blues and purples and greens the deepest, intermediates being the yellows and oranges, and the reddish and maroon being the shallowest slices of events there. We are looking at earthquakes for the past 2 weeks. Yep, there it is, 2 weeks right there. So here we can see that Pāhala cluster in the depth over here. A lot of settling earthquakes across the island all around. Right, there's one that's a magnitude 3 over near Honoka. But also we have on Kilauea the adjustments, fairly minor ongoing, associated with this current eruption. Mauna Loa's got a few earthquakes, nothing major, but still moving and adjusting as she goes. But let's zoom into Kilauea here a little more closely. And you can see there's a couple events in the summit crater. Magnitudes less than 2. A shallow one here in a southwest rift site, right near the surface. Magnitude 2 as well, near that eruption site from last year. And then we have here closer to this bend on the east rift. These are interesting because this is an area we're monitoring to see if there's any connection to the current eruption going on there, but nothing evident quite yet. But a few earthquakes may be moving things around very slowly and subtly over there. More striking to me is this event right over here, the magnitude 3, about a 5-mile depth here that occurred a few days ago on the 1st. And this is part of that south flank sequence. So we're looking at the last 2 weeks here. So with magnitude 3 is a little bit further down rift. If we look at this one was the one we had just today, magnitude 2. So these two more recently. Last week we were looking at the cluster that was over here. So here we have magnitude 3.2 and 2.2 and some smaller events as well. So you see the south flank is still adjusting. It's maybe not moving quite as much as before, but we are seeing adjustments that last week were there, this week they're here. So you could imagine that this thing is shimmying its way and eventually it will cause some change in the summit equilibrium here by virtue of moving the south flank, opening the rift, and maybe at some point some pathway allows pressure that's building underground the summit to have more space to distribute. But for now, it all seems to be fairly stable. This part of the question of how long this might last that we don't really know, but we're digging at some clues here to try to figure out how that might play out. So right now we're seeing a little bit of signs of south flank movement, but no real adjustment in a summit equilibrium yet. We're still having this almost geysering, episodic fountaining dynamic. Okay, so that's the earthquakes by depth. We like to look at them by size as well. I turn to this main USGS site for that usually here. So now we're looking at just the last week, the last 7 days, and sorting by the largest events we've had. And so there's actually quite a few magnitude 3s and higher this week, 6 events. The largest, a 3.6, that's up here. That's southwest of Hana, right between Maui and Hawaii Island in the channel. Pretty deep. This is one of these settling adjustment earthquakes. We talk about how the islands are essentially moving over this hotspot, and they absorb all this heat, and they expand and deform, and then after they move away from it, and they move off towards where Maui is now, then they start cooling, contracting, and settling, and all of that causes adjustments between all the various layers and chunks of rock that make up the islands and the offshore shelves as well, and the seafloor. So that's what we're seeing there, and a continental crust. I'm sorry, the oceanic crust that's between these two islands here, down deep down, the settling event. And we have others in that same category. Here is another deep one, 13 miles down under Pāhala, also settling. And now the deep ones in the southeast quadrant, these are all the Pāhala earthquakes related to the hotspot, feeding magma into the volcanic system. We think that might feed Kīlauea and Mauna Loa and Halemaʻumaʻu, formerly known as Loihi over here. So there you have that one. And magnitude 3 is also down in that cluster. And here is our magnitude 3 we just discussed on the south flank from this week. There it is. So it's just one of these 6 events, with the 6th one being another settling event over here in Honoka'a, magnitude 3 as well. So a lot of earthquakes happening. Nothing really concerning overall. Earthquakes can fall into different patterns here. We can have lots of small earthquakes in a short space of time and a small area. That's more what we're looking for volcanic eruptions. Otherwise, we're seeing a lot of the longer term background settling and natural processes happening on the island. So we're all good with our earthquakes, and we'll turn to our monitoring segment now on Kilauea. And as we showed you before, there is this new thermal map. You can see March 4th before the onset here, when the lava flows were just first oozing out during that weekly overflight. Happened to catch it right when they're doing that first flyover. So you actually can see that very first ooze out in the early morning from the south vent here at the pre-onset of episode 12 here. And then they came back the next day, and by the next day they got this more expansive map of the flows. And so you can see the area that's even this lighter blue, that first bigger flood of lava where it spreads across and covers the crater floor. And where it's more reddish and yellowish, that's where lava is thicker and hotter or more recent and still flowing in these channels in this big yellow ribbon through the middle right here. So pretty interesting, right? You see it's actually originating in the southwest part of the crater wall, and it's reaching all the way to the top center of the crater wall right over here. And wholly separately are these vigorous ooze-outs next to the down-drop block on the eastern side here. Come more to that here in a few minutes after a break, where we actually have images of the scientists. They actually land down here on this piece of ground, which is solid and not floating on lava like everything else. And they can approach lava when it's right next to there and take samples. So it looks like they did take samples to then compare whether this lava is the same lava as we see coming out here, which is, we know this is all fresh, really gassy stuff, very frothy, shooting big sponge-like rocks onto the rim up here. Or if this is more of the older gooey lava we see fleshed out, maybe it's been cooling within the lava lake and it's just being pushed out by the pressure and the forces from the side. So that's some of the interesting things to look forward to. USGS reporting for us here. Looking at our data for the last week, we have a pretty clean elevation graph here. So this is a laser rangefinder pointing down at the crater floor, and it's catching here at the beginning of the eruption, this onset of the flood of lava coming across there. A very brief pause in where this laser is pointing, that one exact spot, before another flow comes across it quickly afterwards here, and again that happens again here, and then again, and finally as the gas escapes from the flow and it settles back down and loses elevation, then it settles at a height, something in here. So here we can actually see we're at 958.5 meters. And so that gives us some depth measure we can compare for you guys in the future. You can see correspondingly, here is a tilt. So there is our buildup of pressure with our daily variations that are happening right around noon every day, middle of the day. We see this little wiggle. So that's not believed to be something in a volcano. I suppose it could be, but it's usually something in instrumentation right there. Then here we have that onset of eruption, release of pressure. And as I pointed out earlier, it's really interesting to me to see how there's really two different angles here, right? We have this first steep part right there. That's when we have both fountains, north vent and south vent, going simultaneously. Then the north vent shuts off for a while, gives us this, just the south vent erupting. The north vent reactivates again, we get that right there, a steeper drop at the very bottom, and then they both shut off, and we start the repressurization process from there. So really interesting dynamic between the two events there. It's really, they're basically two different openings out of the same body of magma just beneath the surface there. So it's something like in the nozzle, in the shape of the nozzle, how it can actually push up one way or the other. With it can split not very near the surface, but slightly further down, where you can sometimes see some really interesting dynamics of one activates. And some episodes we've seen just the south vent, some episodes just the north vent, sometimes both. So good variability in what we're seeing there. Earthquake counts per day over the last week are not very dramatic. You really can't see much of a change. In fact, you see that the highest counts were earlier in the week. And as we approached the eruption, earthquake counts actually went down. And to explain this, we have to look a little more closely at where these earthquakes are actually occurring. So we come in to look at the earthquakes depth versus time here over the last week. The Pāhala earthquakes are contributing to these counts, as are lots of these south flank events. And really, it may be more of these south flank events that are adding to these counts earlier in the week here. It helps to look at these on the map. Here is these earthquakes on the map, and you can see that on a map for the last week, we have very few earthquakes around the summit whatsoever, so none of those counts are really relevant to what we're seeing at the summit eruption for the most part up here. Mostly they're here in the south flank. You see this cluster in the central south of the caldera, and this pair of earthquakes we just talked about slightly further over, just south of Pu'o'o crater, right over there, just southeast Makai of that. So those are the earthquakes, and in cross-section, there they are, deeper events. Looking at the last month, once again, we have a beautiful graph because the noise has been cleared off of here. So here's episode 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8. Each one of these sending a flood of lava onto the crater floor with lots of little wiggles in between. But then as the gas escapes and it cools off, it settles down at a slightly higher level. See that again, jumps up, settles down. It's still gained. Looks like in that case, it was about 949 to 953, 4 meters or so, right? 15 feet-ish that time. This next episode, you can see, again, maybe 1 meter. So episode 11 looks like it might have gained 2 meters or so. And the most recent episode here, episode 12, looks like it went from 955 to 958, so maybe 3 meters-ish. Right? You're looking at an order of 10 or 12 feet of new pavement at the one spot where this laser is pointing on a crater floor. It's not equally thick everywhere across the whole pancake. It's thicker in some spots than others. And so we're looking at just one point and looking at the overall pattern as much as the actual gains we're seeing here. So pretty cool to see this cleaned up for the first time here. We'll pull this out for the records, and I think next week we'll compare it to some of the other data we have from previous eruptions as well. So you see the tilt corresponds to that as well, that buildup in pressure, eruption begins, decrease in pressure, repressurization, corresponding exactly to each one of those episodes of flooding on the crater floor. There is a sandhill station following the summit station in blue here. And we also have in green the Pu'o'o station showing a much different pattern, completely unaffected by anything happening at the summit, just a long-term deflation pattern as it's essentially like an exhale settling as it's still recovering from recent events. Most recently, it was the Nepal eruption in September 2024. Okay, so earthquake counts per day over the last month are not as easy to pick out any clear pattern relative to the eruptions here as well, because as we pointed out, many of these earthquakes are actually other parts of the volcano rather than underneath the summit where this pressure is building right there. So pattern for the whole last month and for the whole year, earthquakes per week now, you can see we've settled into this low pattern with the last higher events being in mid-December prior to this onset of eruption on December 23rd of last year. Summit GPS. At the summit crater, north and south, we're measuring the distance and whether it gets further apart, closer together. For the last year, it was mostly getting further apart, accelerated before eruptions or leave by eruptions, contracting during eruptions. And we see that pattern happening quite a lot with lots of activity, eruptions and intrusions and all those happening all through there. Until we came to December of this year or last year and January through March of this year now, where we see that this whole eruption is in there. And overall, it's been much flatter and in equilibrium, right, and balance compared to what we had going on before. And so within that balance, we do see this sawtooth pattern of it, just like we saw in a tilt meter, of it spreading out as it building pressure and then contracting, coming closer together, it relieves pressure, and doing that for every single episode all through there. It's nice when the graphs are clean with no noise in them, and you can see these beautiful patterns. These could all be in textbooks. At Pu'u'o in the Middle East Rift Zone, it gets more muddy because of that intrusion that preceded the Nepal eruption in 2024. But since December of last year, you can see we're settled into a contracting pattern across a Middle East Rift Zone at Pu'u'o as well. So all this is to reassure people living in the Lower East Rift that there is no change happening in that area quite yet. We do know it's just a matter of time. Could be decades if we're lucky, right? But that's why we monitor and educate, so we can learn what the signals are, what the patterns are, how we prepare ourselves, what the reality is, and what we live with when we have any events coming into our communities like we had in 2018. All right, so that's our monitoring signals there. I think we'll leave it at that for the graphs and come over to the text notices from the USGS. And so I'll pick it up on Tuesday morning when we have the first update that Kilauea began erupting intermittent sluggish lava flows at 7:30 a.m. Now, it's an interesting discrepancy. It's not a big deal at all, but like you might see some different numbers and some different terminology here, and I'll just point out what's going on here because I had to work my way through this as well. They note that in this update on Tuesday morning that this marks the start of episode 12, even though we only have intermittent sluggish lava flows. So some of the previous events, we've had sluggish flows as well. Maybe they didn't start off intermittent, they began more continuous. But there's a difference between when we see sluggish lava come out just from the vent pushed out, and when we see the fountains actually begin shooting into the air, right? So we can see here, maybe for the first time, the most emphatic difference between these phases here, because we have small sluggish flows, one from the south vent between 7:30 and 7:50 a.m., one from the north vent between 9:33 and 9:45 a.m., and then it stops for several hours. And that's where this first update's coming through, is during that pause, those several hours in between there. And so by 2 p.m., they noted that continuous fountaining started at 2 p.m., and that was when the fountaining actually begins, right? So depending on how you count it, you might consider this to be the beginning of the episode, right? So coming to this a little later. Fountains from the north vent were reaching 150 feet high by 2:20 p.m. there. So that was the beginning announcement of the fountaining phase. Then the next morning, Wednesday, May 5th, or March 5th, 9:43 a.m., they note that the eruption continued, but was reduced from yesterday's activity. Here they give more details about the fountains themselves. Fountaining began at 2 p.m. and reached heights of 600 feet by 3 p.m. and sustained them until the north vent quit erupting at 8:26 p.m. on March 4th. The south vent sustained fountains of 200 to 400 feet, or 60 to 120 meters, which decreased at 5 a.m. And at 8 a.m., it increased again, with the north vent resuming fountaining at 8:42 to 9:11 a.m. So that was the status at that point, where the daily update came out at 9:43 a.m. It wouldn't be much longer after that. 11:48 a.m., they put out another status report saying that episode 12 ended at 10:37 a.m. after just under 22 hours of continuous eruptive activity. So those 22 hours are counting from 12:45 p.m. when lava is oozing out, and it's not stopping oozing out, but it's not fountaining quite yet. So if you're going to do fountaining was maybe about 1 hour less than that, right? So about 21 hours of fountaining, which still makes it on the longer end of episodes that we've seen recently. So, and that's interesting how we had that with that 2-phase with both vents together and then just the south vent onwards from there. Maybe that allowed it to extend and be longer than the last episodes that we've had. Because if we turn to the table here, and here's our table with a timeline, episode numbers. Let me see if I can just reload this in case anything's changed here. But you see that some episodes have been as short as 13, 14 hours. There's 14, 15, 14, 13 hours. The longest one has been 8.5 days, right in there. But really, since episode 7, we'll look at, right, we've had this more distinguishable pattern that's about on this week schedule where we have 16 hours, 6 days, about 21.5 hours, 6 days, 22.5 hours, 7 days, 13 hours, 5 days, 13 hours, 6 days. Here they write 15 hours. I'm not sure the 15, this maybe is a typo. I would say probably 21, 22, somewhere in there, right? And then what's going to be our pause here, right? You would guess, if you were just picking randomly, you would say the average looks pretty close. 6 days, 6 days, 6 days, 6 days right there, right? So that seems to be the pattern that's emerging here now in our equilibrium state. So interesting to see how that went out, how the flows came out, that order of fountains we've talked about here as well. All right. North vent fountains dropped in height before the north vent quit erupting, in fact, there. So it's interesting to see how that played out. We can look at that a little more closely in our time lapses as well. So that was the text update during, and then there is the one that announces the end, and our update from today, where we have a little bit more of the reinflation pattern established, can actually put out a forecast of a new episode expected in the next 5 to 7 days. And so that fits into that average of 6 quite nicely as well. So that's what we have happening here. When I was reading through this update, there seems to be a little bit more errors, we'll say, in the update here, and this might be something that is a result of some of the impacts happening at the USGS and other federal agencies here. But for example, just to pull one thing out here, see the March 5th update for detailed account of episode 13. Clearly, we haven't had 13 yet, and so I won't go through here and pick apart all the grammar, but you can see something has changed in the process of putting out these updates, and it's likely impact because of these federal cuts going on here too. So that is the monitoring data. We're going to switch to Community Corner next, but I did want to just very briefly just mention that there is some flux happening with the USGS. Here is an article from our local paper, Hawaii Tribune Herald, just noting that downtown Hilo Post Office, the HVO site at the Ironworks building, among possible federal cuts. But I won't get into all of that. I can just show you, I'll show you that this is still unraveling in process. The AP put out an article that the current administration has deleted the list of buildings targeted for sale. So are they not? It's not quite clear. And the story is still unfolding. I won't dig into what the GSA is doing or anything like that, right? And not to get political about anything, but just to share with people that there are impacts to our mission in particular here with volcano monitoring and keeping people safe on the island because of the impact to the USGS and federal cuts. And beyond that, science more generally at the universities and across all the whole scientific community is being affected by this in a pretty staggering way. So we will leave it at that here for now, and hopefully can bring you more information on this. This is a tricky thing to really source anything that's really real because things are changing so quickly. And there's a real fear of reprisal of anyone talking about anything. So there's not a lot of information coming out, and we can just speak from our own personal experiences, what we see happening in our community here. So, all right, I'll pass our community corner on to Lou and Dane from here. And keep on
sounds
rolling.
good. Thank you, Phil. All right, we'll bring Lou in here, and I'll see you in a minute. Hey, Lou.
Hey, I don't know if anybody noticed this in the chat, but Dane is on the board for Tuesday, and Don Stringer. So you put it out there. I'll make sure everybody
I said
knows.
morning, though, and I love how chat immediately goes, Lou's taking 4 p.m. Lou's taking 4 p.m.
4 p.m. ish.
They know you
Nice.
too.
All right, let's get into our community corner for March 6, 2025. We know everything that's going on at the park is busy. So a good reminder that the Kilauea Visitor Center is closed. It is now the Kilauea Welcome Center. There are all kinds of closures and delays up there. The nene are nesting, or they're walking around, or they're sleeping. So the Pu'upuai parking lot and overlook is closed. Watch out for the yellow jackets and never enter restricted areas. This small void is up there still. It's kind of become a new place to visit and sightsee, I've noticed, around the park.
But the cone or that vent there,
That vent, yeah.
it's gotten bigger too since that photo. Yeah.
How big do we think that could get? Can it?
I don't know. It depends about how the shape of the crack that it's getting
Mhm.
exposed is. Right. Some kind of feature there that got filled in and then eventually got wiggled out. And the steam is really good at making a hole through stuff, like to
Right.
erode things and work its way to the surface.
Well, that'll be interesting if that becomes a permanent fixture, right?
Oh, black screen, Lou, black screen.
Black screen.
Is
Here we
it?
go again. How's that? Are we back?
Yes. Yeah. You're good.
Okay. Crazy, huh?
That didn't get fixed.
Nope. All right. Safety
About that,
tips,
everybody.
remember, huh?
Sorry about that, everybody.
Yep. We were trying to keep an eye on it because we knew that it might come up, but thank you for the reminder there. Okay, obey some speed up there. Take your time in the park. It is busy. We already know where our viewing areas are. Right outside Volcano House is going to be packed, and the parking is minimal around there. Go slow. Like I said earlier, the visitor center is closed, and what makes parking difficult is they have this one section of the parking area closed off, so we lost more than half of our parking there. So you're going to have to go slow. There are no after dark in the parks going on, and Leo, Manu are suspended up there. There is next week, if you tune in, I'll talk about an event that's going on at the Kahuku unit. That's about the only place that's going on having events right now. There's a look at our new welcome center. It's in the Kilauea military camp where you can get water if you need it. You can actually even go bowling if you like. They have a gift store in there and a bookstore, so check that out. There's fairly good parking around there. Just there are people staying the night, so go slow. And if you park there, you can walk out to the rim pretty easily from there. Construction continues. There are these road work ahead signs everywhere, and there are more blind turns in this park than you could possibly imagine. And take it slow, especially at night. This is a look at Devastation Trail parking lot when there's no traffic in there and there's nobody parked, and the other day when there's a lot of traffic, and you can see how tight it gets in there. So take it easy. There are kids that run in that parking lot. I've been in there at night, and families are there. Kids dart out, so go slow. You cannot park on the side of the road coming into this parking lot. They have it coned off. Please don't move the cones. That's where the nene are hanging out, or it's a ledge to fall off of. There's also, besides for all the 2-year project stuff that's going on, Hawaiian Electric decided to jump in on this party, and they started on March 3rd, and they are doing intermittent work and closures all through the park. So we're just going to add why not, right? since there's so much traffic in the park and parking is tough, I dug up and I've seen the bus coming through there, and there's actually, you can hop on the Helion from Hilo if you are that adventurous and take the bus. Dane, have you ever taken the bus from Hilo?
No.
Come
not.
on.
Are you able to get a ride back?
If you make it on time. I mean, it runs 7 days a week, but I think the last run is like 5 p.m. So you might have to bunker in for the night, or it's a day trip.
Yeah, it's a day trip.
You still have to pay for the bus fare as well as the $15 to get into the park. I did put a link to the red line. That's the line you need if you're going to take the bus from Hilo up. It's the red line. I did put the information in the description below with the link. This is the one thing that's going on in the park, Life on the Edge. It happens every day. You can learn about Hawaii geology, culture plants. It's a couple different times, 10, 11, 1, and 2. The rangers are extremely knowledgeable. They love to share stories. Some of these rangers have been there for a very long time, so they can tell you a lot of history about the park. I encourage you, if you're going to take the time to come here and go to our park, talk to these rangers. And we have an event going on. It's Ohana Fun Day for the Kohala Resilience Hub. That's going on this Saturday at March 8th at, let's see here, it's at 10 o'clock. Did I not have the time on there? Yeah. The one thing here is from 10 to 1. If you are one of the first 50 participants, they have giveaways. So get there early from 10 to 1 at the Hisaoka Gym in Kohala.
And we will be there. So yeah, check out the Resilience Fair tomorrow in Kohala. And we'd like to thank the Puna Strong and the Kilauea Recovery through the County of Hawaii, as well as the Hawaii Community Foundation for helping keep this type of program, as well as our other program, which does include things like tomorrow, going and doing the youth development, reaching out with our traveling volcano toolkit, which is an awesome little thing that we are able to take around and share with all the youth. And also our digital resilience program. So we've been getting that kicked off as well. So looking forward to everything going through. And I think with that, we can roll into some thank yous.
Hey, one more thing on that, Dane. If anybody goes to this event this weekend, see, we're not up, we're black, so there we go. If anybody goes to this event this weekend, please stop by and we'll take your picture with Dane. We're doing pictures.
Is that what we're doing? We do have a $20 super chat that came through from Ovi-san. $20 for all the hard work each week. Appreciate the support there. If you do like to make donations, we do take super chats, but we also take donations over on hveri.org/donate if you are so inclined. Those are tax deductible donations. We have our EIN on the screen there for our nonprofit. And I think with that, we can go back and get Phil again.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Lou.
You got it.
Welcome back.
All right, yeah. So Saturday we'll be up in Kohala.
Yeah.
Still Thursday today. All right.
Yes,
let's
sir.
get to our observations, and
All right.
some of those on screen here. I'm going to start off with just this image that we dug up of a double rainbow. This is from the B1 camera. This is the morning of the activation. So it was in between those sluggish flows coming out, rain coming through, and then the fountains would start a couple hours after this or so. So this is a cool capture here. We're all looking at the webcam. Maybe you were one of those people and got to see this as well. Pretty cool to see that. But let's move on to our time lapses, and starting off with the KW camera. Play that for you guys here. This first oozing flows coming out the bottom, the fountains. You can see some rain coming through. And then that big river of lava that fans out in this mid stage through here, but most of it's leading off to the north in that direction over here. Let's see if this is looping. Not quite looping. So the last flow is contracting and cooling right there. Let's see this play through again. There's our oozing flows. Here comes the rain. The first flows that come out of the south vent area are largely filling the south part of the corner. When the north vent reactivates right here, you see it floods out and puts out this flow in the foreground all through here as well too. And the south vent flow is the one that keeps oozing and overturning for the next day as it was thicker and deeper in the central area right through here. Play it through one more time without dragging the mouse all over it, and Note as well those ooze-up flows in that top part of the screen, in the back of the crater, all through there as well. There it is, nighttime, overturning, settling, contracting. KW camera. So same view as that will be our thermal camera. This is the F1 camera. So here, similar again, here's our ooze-up, our first little bursts. There is our double fountain. North vent shuts off. South vent's active. North vent's going to reactivate. There it goes, that quick burst that puts all this orange and turns the whole bottom front of the screen pink right through there. With this later overturning and contracting of the deeper, thicker part of the lava flow field out through here. One more time. South vent, north vent, burst of both vents. North vent shuts off. South vent keeps going. North vent comes in again. There it is. Meanwhile, you have this long ribbon of river of lava going to the north from the south vent, and ooze-up flows still happening here in the back. So pretty interesting to see that. The V1 camera, which is the live stream view, play you guys what that might look like. You see these fountains were quite tall. We didn't have, unlike some of the previous episodes, a whole lot of blockage of the vent, it seemed like. It seems like the fountain was shooting pretty close to vertical in that case there, where some of the previous ones we've seen it leaning way over and landing on this upper ledge over here. So didn't see that so much this time. There's an ending phase with lava still oozing, slowly moving, but here's those fountains. So peaking quite high, but straight up right there from this perspective, looks like it's above the crater rim at some points. And lots of gas coming out. From this angle, you really see just that south vent channel as the main dominant flow path throughout the image here. One last time. You can see those tall fountains above that crater rim there. The V1 camera, that's the live stream, in case you did not catch this. This is just catching every 10 minutes or so. So if you're ever watching this live, then you're seeing way more detail than we're capturing here. This is more the big picture, long-term process. But we're trying to manipulate time to make it so you can really, really as a human, understand this geologic process more easily by changing time, the rate of time passing here. All right, we'll move to the S2 camera. And I think this is where we can get the most detail. Just start off by just playing this loop here. South vent flow, north vent flow. North vent activates first, south vent next, both together. South vent gets taller, north vent shuts off. South vent's still going. North vent's going to reactivate. There it is, briefly. Everything shuts off at the end. So I think that one will go through. Well, let's see, that's not quite there. Let's see if I can get my other video up on the screen here. There it is. All right, so here we are, 1:50 p.m. Maybe I'll go back to the beginning here. This interface lets me manipulate it a little more easily here. So we're going to start. There's our ooze up flow, or our sluggish intermittent flow from the south vent by 8:20. Play it again. Here comes our north vent one right there. We start seeing some low level fountaining happening in the south vent a little bit there. And here I'm going to back it up and let's just go through frame by frame, right? So here we go. There's our ooze up. There's our north vent coming in first, 2:20 p.m. See, it's getting tall. Nothing out of the south vent yet. It's starting to maybe pop up a little bit. There is a little clearer view of that. And then by 3 p.m., there we have both the south vent and north vent. This very first change, you can see how the north vent seems like it drops in height by half, like that pressure is being split from the one to both of the vents immediately there. But then as time goes on, both of the vents increase in height together. And you can see there, they're both almost up to the crater rim. Then the north vent starts slowing down. You see the south vent's still up to the crater rim, but the north vent's lower. Look at the south vent here. You can see this black stuff is cooled lava rock. And it's all the way up here. That would be the Pele's hair and the tephra and all that other stuff being caught in this thermal updraft. And you can see for the rest of that evening there, we have the south vent. Look at that. You can see red all the way up there above the crater rim. South vent, north vent still going. Here comes nightfall. Really bright. North vent's getting lower, lower. North vent looks shut off. There's still lava coming out of the spillway right there. But by 8:30 p.m., you see no glow coming from that pit anymore, and that stream is shutting off. The south vent's still going. There it is, still going. Until the morning, 6:50, still going. You see how it's quite low now, just right above the rim of the cone. Whereas earlier in the night, it had been a little bit taller than that. It's hard to tell when we have these overexposed shots, right? Although right here, you can see there's actually some lava emerging from the overexposed white spot there. So you can see that fountains were a little bit higher, and they drop down. And then there is a north vent coming back in, 8:50. You see that little bit of red right at the rim of the cone. By 9:05, it's a little bit higher again. Now we're splitting the height between both fountains again there. And by 9:20 there, it's shut off again. South vent's holding on, 9:35, 9:50, 10:05, 10:20, 10:35. The south vent is just about shut off as well there. And lava keeps moving here through the spillways and the flow field, but that's in detail the end of the sequence there. So one more time, a little faster there, but you can see that interesting pattern of back and forth between the south vent and the north vent. And so from that, I thought it was really interesting to maybe go back and look at the history of the episodes. And so I haven't done anything more than just put this video together for you guys today. Or I don't have time to do any more compilation than that, but I'm back here to episode 3. Episode 3 of this view, there is our south vent and north vent together. I'm going to play this. I've just essentially clipped out each of the episode and how they've come out from these vents. So there you see, we have the south vent more active, north vent's a little slower back in episode 3, but they're both growing. Episode 3 was one of our longer lasting episodes. Episode 4 starts at the north, goes to the south. They're both active at the same time. Both shut off at the same time. Episode 5 was just the north vent. Episode 6, north vent just again. 7 was both. Episode 8 was both. Episode 9 starts in the north, goes south. Episode 10 was mostly the north. 11 north, then south. The south was the one glowing mostly between 11 and 12. And then for 12 here, it was mostly the south. We had both together, switching to the south only and ending with both once again there. So I know that's kind of fast, but I'm going back over 2 months now. I'll play it without drawing on the screen one more time here so you can just see the sequence of how the cones are growing over time. Everything is rising. The camera moves a little bit here and there. We'll fix that in the future to make it more stable. But see the development of the flow field, the growth of those cones, the pattern of the fountains. A pretty fascinating 2 months we've lived through here watching changes in Kilauea. Really most of the last 7 years, right? 2018 was terrifying as well as interesting, and thankfully we've come past the terrifying to more of an interesting part, but that's why we do our nonprofit work, is to prepare for any more human impacts in the future, right? Trying to improve preparedness and response through education. That's our mission here. So that was our clean S2 camera for episodes 3 through 12. And we'll move on to some of the images released by the USGS. There is a photo chronology for March 4th released here. This starts off with overflight that was taken that morning of the activation. So they're normally scheduled for that day anyways to be flying over. And so they happen to be flying over, and it happened to be reactivating just at that moment. Here you see the north vent is the one reactivating at that point in the morning. The south vent has already put out its intermittent sluggish flow right there. North vent has not yet, so that really narrows it into that time really between 8:30 and 9:30, something like that, right in the morning when they're flying over. So you can see that in between stage in a little bit higher resolution here. You can see how that little hole right in the middle there. It's interesting to think about whether that whole jet is shooting out that same size hole. And then, as we mentioned, USGS landed there in a downdrop block, and these are the ooze-up flows on the eastern part of the crater rim that they're now sampling. And this is going to be the samples that yield for us some information about the history of this magma, the story of this magma compared to the magma coming out, shooting on the crater rim, for which they also have samples. So that'd be fascinating to look at that. All right, so there's that first video. We have some images you can see here. They're on the ground near that lava flow sampling site to sample there. Ooze-up flow from the molten lake interior, most likely. Here they see, coincident with a scheduled USGS overflight on the morning, they saw the eruption start. Here once again, let me make this bigger. There's something else that changed in my browser, but there's ooze-up flows. Capture from that video, you see that bubbling up at the north vent and the sluggish flow from the south vent there. And once again, the sampling of that flow. You really can see how this lava looks much more spiny in texture, and it's a whole different texture and just character than what we see shooting out of the fountain. So really interesting to note that. And I would imagine that all the crystals and chemistry will tell us the same story. All right, there's our webcam capture of episode 12 ongoing, along with a panoramic view from Volcano House area, looking at Kilauea, the whole Kilauea caldera with Mauna Loa in the background, and gas emitting in that morning before the lava was really pumping out. So that was the first photo release from March 4th. And there was another release that was put out on March 6th that also steps us back to the 4th, but starting from the top. Day after the end of episode 12, here they are. They're measuring gas up here. Interesting noted here, they actually report 1,200 tons of SO2 per day was what they reported on this morning just after the end of episode 12. We also have from the other reports that they measured during the double fountains 35,000 tons of SO2 per day. When the fountains dropped down, just one fountain, it was a little lower, it was 20,000 tons per day. And then when it shut off, it was down to 1,200 tons per day. I still feel like someday this would be good for us to change to looking at this as SO2 per hour, because we're not really keeping any of those rates for a full day. So it's a little bit hard to understand what that really means. But lots of gas coming out and less during a pause now, but still 1,200 tons per day is a lot. You would break an EPA regulation for any factory. So you can't regulate the volcano, of course, but just for a relative comparison of what's considered healthy for people to be around. Right? So people who do live nearby or visiting nearby do need to take precautions, especially if they have any respiratory sensitivities or prolonged repeated exposure or those kind of things. Right? So we have another photograph here. We're looking past all this gas at what's left of the June 2023 eruption. And let's see here. I think I have got this one pulled out and zoomed in. There it is. Yeah, so it's past this gas. This all is lava from this current eruption, episodes 1 through 12, all around. And this was at one point a cinder and spatter cone against the wall of the crater. And so lava has come and flooded all around it. And now you only see the very tip of it left above the most recent flow field. And depending on the rate of the episodes and paving this area, we might see this entire thing disappear beneath the lava flows at some point in the next month or two. So we'll see. It's a good visual point of reference to see how deep the flows are getting in that area, that southwest part of the crater floor. So, all right. We also have this interesting image here, right? If you look at this, this is a milk jug. I'll just read what it says here, right? So HVO collects tephra from lava fountaining in buckets. Each bucket has a weight inside to prevent high winds from blowing the bucket away. Some of these weights are milk jugs filled with sand. On March 6th, HVO staff discovered a lava bomb from episode 12 fountains, pierced and partially melted a milk jug weight in a bucket located several hundred yards west of the western rim of Halemaʻumaʻu. So you might think your bucket's in a great location until the fountain decides to get super high and then it happens to drop a piece of lava right into your milk jug. So there you go. That's just showing what happened.
It just shows that our traveling toolkit for lava stuff, we have a lava bomb launcher and we launch stuff into buckets. So actually real. The volcano does that too.
Yep, it does. Yeah. Might have had some doubts when we were designing that thing at the start, but there you go, right? If you happen to be Matt Patrick up there at the rim and filming some of these fountains, and you might have to keep an eye out for those aerial projectiles and know some physics and practice where that thing might fall towards you and not get hit by it for sure. Yeah, which is why you see them wearing hard hats and all that protective gear out there. Exactly that reason. All right, so here we go. Some more views. Episode 12. They're down on the crater floor. Here is this ooze up flow. You see how slabby and clinkery it looks compared to what we see in a fountain area, right? Like the very frothy samples. For example, this one. There is Natalia Deling with her protective gear, gas mask, and helmet, as we just described there, right? Even the eyewear. But this is a very big, light, frothy, sponge-like piece of lava that got shot out from this eruption. Here's what they say. Approximately 300 feet high fountains. The tephrit traveled downwind. This one was about 16 inches, 40 centimeters long. They are very bubble-rich and delicate, breaking easily when they are moved. A photo by Drew Downs. And we have our thermal images that we shared earlier here as well. And then one other video. What is this one? Is this? This is, yeah, this video right. Nope, that was not that. It's this video right here. So, which was when they did their overflight. They caught some other imagery, a wider view of the crater floor. So this is a down drop block on the side. The fountains are off over there. But here you see this pad of gray lava. That's this ooze up area. The stuff is coming up from below, and looks like there's some features like this little horseshoe shaped ridge there that's getting drowned as lava is oozing up all around it. You can see here the edge of the more recent flows of the episode that came out of the vent through there. And you see we still have a patch of vigorous degassing, all this discolored lava with sulfur minerals over here in this eastern part of the crater floor as well. See, we're coming around. It's hard to really gauge the full size of the caldera and the crater here when we show you the maps and show you the different angles. We're usually on the ground, and it's hard to see that low angle size of the thing, right? So I like this aerial view for that reason, at the very least. There is our crater rim drive that collapsed in 2018 into the crater right there, and a piece on a block down below, and a gas plume traveling down across Kau. And here is that very spiny, very slow-moving lava flow. You can see this is why I think this is the ooze-up flow from the molten interior of a lava lake. See how slowly it moves, how gas poor it looks compared to the other stuff we were looking at before. It doesn't look like you could take a 12-inch chunk and it would just break apart in your hands like a sponge like the other stuff, right? So clearly the gas is much further for the gas, but beyond that, they can look at the olivine crystals in here and the textures on them and give you a history of how the magma has been cooling, how long it might be cooling, how long was it sitting in a lava lake, did it get flushed out, from where, when, all those things can be interesting conclusions as well. Okay, so yeah, that was that video. So back to March 4th, views of episode 12. There's that tall fountain once again. And so I think there's this one, yeah, zoomed in there. So just can see a view from, looks like Kilauea Overlook area or Steam Vents area, KMC area. Tall fountain there, almost as tall as a rim from the south vent on the left and north vent a little lower on the right there. Yeah, photo by Katie Mullican from KMC, that one was, military camp. Nice capture of all different textures and fragmentation of the lava fountain right there. This is turning into tephra. So nice description there. I won't read through all that. Scientists wearing their personal protective equipment, even as they're using their video and laser equipment. There's a webcam over here to the right. High visibility clothing as well, in case something happens, they need to find each other there. And this nice panorama by Matt Patrick, showing the fountains there with that double flow merging, spilling over from this upper ponded area and there to the lower ponded area. You can see this lower ponded area pretty well right there. And then it starts spilling over also. And there's where you have that big river finding the low spot to the north part of the crater wall. And yeah, we'll end it this segment of the images with this video from Matt as well. I believe this is from Matt. This is usually where he stands in the videos he shoots. So I assume this was the one we showed you at the top as well. So here's where I'm saying if your lava buckets are not too far from here, they're in fact behind the cameraman. So you can see all this stuff here. This is a great time to be here. The stuff's blowing off in that direction, but this is what you'd be looking at. If it's coming towards you, you have to start backing away, right? You see stuff landing in the foreground over here. There's those rivers coming out over there. Pretty impressive stuff there. So zooming in, you can see that fragmentations of the class again, right? You can see it's coming up red, and when it actually cools enough to become solid, it turns that darker color. It's still super hot, maybe still even a little bit ductile, but it's hardening, and at that point it's becoming solid. If it lands, it's going to land and actually break and crack off into cracked bits of rock, as opposed to landing like a cow patty, still liquid and oozing out, which you get that too sometimes. But those are different kinds of processes of fragmentation and deposition there. So tons of lava being shot out, breaking apart in all different sizes, all shapes getting strung out. You can get two of those chunks being pulled apart. That's how you make your Pele's hair, is by stringing out the lava into thin strands and then blowing it up on the wind. And the stuff that falls slightly further away, it's building up the spatter cone. Rampart would be more like a line, so it's more like a cone here. They're roundish. There's a big layer of splash, adding a few inches to that cone there. And again, they're all on the bottom. Look at all this oozing overflows all through here, running down the wall of the cone. There's that smaller north fountain right there, with the south fountain just shooting all the way off the screen on the left. And that reminds me of that spot where, who is it, Frodo and Sam get rescued by the eagles on the side of Mount Doom.
Yeah, Mount Doom.
They're like hanging out somewhere like just in there. Yeah, would not be a good place to be.
Yeah. I always was amazed at how their hair didn't get cooked at the, sitting in that. But hey, that's just me. And
yeah. So here we are, 1813, live view at the USGS camera. So there it is, degassing. Not as much gas coming out now as during the fountains, believe it or not, but we can see it much more clearly now. We'll have the red stuff in the way. So still degassing, or probably about 1,000 tons per day. And I'll come back to our look at the webcams. Let me just give us a refresh. Get it to the most current views here, and there's our south and north vents degassing from the south S2 camera, view from the crater rim in the west, everything cooling in the crater floor. Thermal camera might be the most insightful. You see that the central part of the flow field is actually stopped moving and starting to cool, but back here, this bright spot is showing there's still active ooze-up flows still happening right now, all the way in that eastern branch. Somewhat independently of what's happening with the fountain episodes here. Continues to ooze up over in that area. V1, B1, and the B1, you get a view of this ooze up flow right there. Just a little pad right over there. And from the B2, it's a little bit further off to the right of the screen there. So there's our live views, and we'll move on from our observations, start wrapping up here with our volcano watch. Volcano Watch this week is when have lava fountains formed in Kilauea and what are their hazards? And so I think I would classify a little bit more, right? You have different kinds of fountains. They talk about this in the article. In 2018, we had a lava fountain from Ahu'aila'au, also known as Fissure 8, but it was a continuous lava fountain and just kept going and going and going and going for months. And that was the most amazing thing of it. It just kept going at a ridiculously high rate, and it just never took a break until towards the end we started having the pulses and the surges and all that. So that one is different from the other kind of what we have going on now, right? What we have going on now is what we call an episodic fountain, where it's starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And in that vein, there are only a few other eruptions that fall in that same category. Going back in time, we have Kīlauea. That's here on the left. That was in 1959, November to December. We have Mauna Loa. That was from 69 to 74 in the Middle East Rift, although not all of that was lava fountaining. We have Pu'o'o over here, right? That was for several months in 1983 to about 86 or so, in through there, all the fountaining phases, and then our current episodic eruptions at the fountain coming up right here. So yeah, a couple of things to mention about those. We can go into more detail maybe next week on some of this. If we look at the number of episodes of fountains, Kīlauea had 17. Mauna Loa had 12. So 12 matches what we've had now. We actually matched Mauna Loa for 12 episodes, 12 at Mauna Loa as well. So 12, 17. Pu'o'o had 44 episodes over a few years there, first 3 years of eruption, right? So it's not quite clear if we're going to have 3 years and 44 episodes, or we're going to do something like Mauna Loa, where I believe it was 69 and 70, and I think by the end of 1970 they might have ended the high fountains, maybe into 71 a little bit there, but it was really those first year or two. Kīlauea, the whole eruption was only 1 month long, so we've already passed the duration of Kīlauea, even if we haven't had as many episodes in the longer amount of time that we actually have had. Fountain heights, Kīlauea was 1,900 feet, 580 meters. Pu'o'o was up to 1,500 feet, 460 meters. Mauna Loa, 1,770 feet, 540 meters. So all these were what we call high fountains. Over 1,000 feet high is what qualifies as a high fountain. We're starting to approach a little bit with our 600-foot fountains, but we're still like a little bit more than halfway there. We have a long way to go before we have an actual technical high fountain by our geological categorization here on Kilauea Summit. So those are some comparisons there. I think what we can maybe do in the future is go through in more detail some of the signals, what the signals look like, and compare those to what we see here this week. But otherwise, we haven't reached high fountains. We see all the signals continuing inflation, the tremor patterns being the same. So will we catch up to Kīlauea or Pu'o'o as far as number of fountains, fountain heights or episodes? So that remains to be seen. And that's the Volcano Watch for this week. I think it's an interesting topic. We can dig into it a little more. If we get a break between these episodes here, we can start digging into the longer term patterns and statistics as well. So we'll see. If we stay on this weekly schedule, we'll get to it. But it's definitely on our docket to look at this coming up. So that's it for Kilauea. We're going to do a little bit of Mauna Loa just because it is the beginning of the month here. And at the beginning of the month, the USGS puts out their monthly update. And so here for Mauna Loa, seismicity has been low, as expected for the post-eruption phase of the volcano, and similar to previous months. Only minor inflation, magma is still replenishing the reservoir system down there. Gas and temperatures are being monitored. Everything is within normal parameters. So that's the USGS official report. A view from Mauna Loa earlier today at the summit crater of Mokuaweo'oweo. Looks pretty calm and quiet up there. And signal-wise, we're just seeing the daily variations for the most part here, with others much slower trends happening in the background. So daily variations every day on the signals at the tilt there. Earthquakes quite low, and over the last week, all fairly shallow within the volcano. Looking longer term at the last month, we do see some of these variations. We've looked at associations of these with flank movements, perhaps. Some of the earthquakes between Kilauea and Mauna Loa could have an effect, but there also can be weather and longer term cycles. And so it's not quite clear for us as just looking at the raw data like this at the 1 month time frame and without having it cleaned up for all other cycles on here, what's really going on. But we can see the scale isn't very great, and it's actually in a pattern that would be relieving pressure within the volcano. So nothing to cause alarm there at all. Earthquake rates for the last month and earthquakes per day have all been under 10 earthquakes per day. Some days, nothing at all in the summit region. So it's really quite low in the background. I'll keep scrolling down. Here is earthquakes per week. You see some jaggedness, and it's really zoomed in. Everything's still below 25 a week for the most part there. Depth versus time. For the last 5 years, earthquakes per month is really the truest picture you see here of where we are, and it's lowest gear that we've seen in the last 5 years. And so that's what we have on Mauna Loa, and we'll wrap it up there. Pass it to you guys, Dane.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil. Yeah, we do got a couple questions here if you want to try and take a stab at that. But first, I'd like to highlight a few donations that came through while we were going. First was Dawn with a $2 super chat. Second one was from Linda with a 2112 super chat. Go ahead and put that on there. We also had a one from Skudget Ed with a 5234. And then we had a $100 and $4 donation over from Mark. Appreciate all this. And then Catherine came through also with a 5234. Catherine with a 3244. 30. That number is where that's what's happening here. Why, if you're looking at things like what are those numbers about? What it is that we have an option on there. So we have processing fees, right, through Stripe, and they give us some good deals because we're a nonprofit, but it's not free. And so the option is to cover the processing fees that we would encounter in taking the donation. So that's why it comes out to an awkward number. It's really a $50 donation type of thing. And then the $2 of processing that they then threw in as a donation. So we appreciate all the support there. I figured I'd explain these weird numbers that are going in there.
Mahalo, everybody, for your donations. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And we do have one question for you here. It's a common one. We've done it before, and it's been a little while. So I'll throw it out there since Mark threw a donation. Could you dispel the frequent rumor that the Helena slump will soon slide seaward in a massive landslide, creating a massive deadly tsunami? One of our common questions that we get online.
Yeah, I've actually been planning to have someone more expert than us come on here and talk about this, and so we'll get to that at some point in the future here. But very briefly, Mark, yes, let's dispel that rumor.
Yeah.
We know it's out there. We can keep talking about it, but we had a geology conference happen a few weeks ago here in Hilo with all these volcanologists from all over the world. I got a chance to talk to the scientists who were aboard the survey ships that went and did all the surveys of offshore, and they made all the graphs and analyzed all the data. And there are some really interesting stories there about changing shape of the island and collapses that happened in the past. The long and short of it is, it does not look like we're set up to do that right now. It looks like that was a previous past phase, and maybe we'll build that again in the future someday, but we're not anywhere near that situation now, and there's some question whether we even could get there from where we are now. So that's the kind of the short version of it there. But there's a lot more to dive into in this. We've done this a little bit in the past. Maybe we'll find a clip at some point, or maybe we'll just make a new one with the actual experts to address this.
And then we can just point people to it and make a short and have all of it out there already, so we can point and just be like, here's the video that says not on the table.
Yeah. So there have been landslides in the past before, right? But that's not does not look likely now. You know, even the ones, you know, I've for a long time in the past, I'll say this, right? I've always said, everyone talks about the Helena slump, and like that's really something in the past. We should worry more so about Mauna Loa and the Alika slides, right? The Alika 1, Alika 2 slides, which were massive landslides off the southwest part of Mauna Loa. You look at Kealakekua. Kealakekua means the path of the gods, right? That's where the gods would go sledding down a hillside into the depths of the ocean. Those are the landslide stories from the Hawaiian lore. So yeah, all that, after discussions with the experts, I feel like that did, I mean, clearly that did happen, but it does not look like we're at the same risk of that anymore either. It's like that was a thing of the past also. So
All right.
probably a lot more questions come up from that, but
That's good.
yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff there. But yeah, as far as Helena slump sliding into the ocean and killing us all, we can debunk that one.
All right. One from Brett here, who asks, what do you make of the glow from the September 2023 fissure? Is it lava traveling underneath the caldera moving around, or could it be a dike in place there reopened?
Yeah, great question. I would lean personally towards the lava traveling, moving around underneath the surface crust of that big puddle of lava, right? With lots of layers of hard stuff in between. There's going to be lots of pathways of goo in between also. I heard that there were several art contests as part of our conference as well. And, you know, one of the things that we heard about it was USGS having drawing contests of what the inside of that lava lake might actually look like in cross section. And pretty much for every brain, there was a different idea of what there could be in there. So that just goes to show how little we know and how much we'd like to know and how interesting that would be for us. So pretty cool to see the ooze-up flows in the down drop block get sampled, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how those results either confirm or challenge us to think differently about what's happening with that, right? But we have seen in the past the whole crater floor rise up as a whole, right? I could find that and throw it up here.
Oh, we've shown it a bunch. Yeah.
Let's see. I have that
over previous, streams. And
he doesn't want to go.
Maybe if it wants to play.
No, doesn't want to do it live, but all right. But yeah, we've shown it before where that whole crater floor like rises up in between episodes. I didn't show it this time because it hasn't done it. It didn't do it in episode 12. Didn't do it in episode 11. It's actually been not the whole crater floor rising upwards, but instead something seems to have changed, or maybe there's some pathways that are feeding the lava all the way to the eastern edge, and it's causing ooze-ups just in the one spot, instead of lifting the whole crater floor up like we were seeing in previous episodes. Yeah, it's a great question. Not really sure. From there,
yeah.
Who was that by again? Dang.
That was Brett.
Brett. So mahalo, Brett.
Yeah. And I think that will do us for this week. Get in at an hour and a half.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate everybody tuning into our broadcast this week. Lots of interesting stuff. It's similar but different every week, it seems like. This pattern's been fascinating. We'll see what's going to be different next time. And the stuff that's the same is usually pretty cool. The fountains and the flows and the patterns that it leaves and processes it gives us insight to across the caldera floor. All right, so mahalo everybody once again. If you guys are watching us on replay, appreciate you too. As always, we appreciate you dropping a like, comment, subscribe, anything to help the algorithm recommend us to other people and keep us relevant here, so that if there's really ever a real disaster, we'll be able to reach as many people as possible. That's really our ultimate goal with all of us. So appreciate everybody. From the nonprofit HVERI, Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. We got Lou in the back end, Dane DuPont, and I'm Philip Ong. Until next week, aloha everybody. Hui ho.